Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. It's your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Reach out to me directly, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Today we are discussing a rarely seen early variant of the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak OffShore. This is a D-Series watch from the mid-90s, and it is the Royal Oak OffShore Complete Calendar. The 25807BA in yellow gold. This is also one of the most wearable offshores ever made, as it is nominally a 38mm watch, but again, you're going to want to think of it as bigger than that because it's still a Royal Oak offshore. In terms of thickness, it's slimmer than you might expect, 12.5mm. It doesn't look like a thin watch, but it's comparable to something along the lines of a Rolex Submariner in that regard. Now, from lug to lug, it measures 49mm, which means across the wrist, it's one of the shorter offshores. You can see there is no lack of wrist presence. It's still a large and very heavy watch. I would recommend it for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference, and I rarely say that about offshores. For practical purposes, think of this as a 41mm conventional round watch, and you get the idea of the fit. Now, you can see how thin it is compared to my sleeve here. This really is a rare offshore that can be worn underneath a cuff. You can also see the down the barrel shot. And one unusual feature of this watch ergonomically is that unlike the standard offshores on bracelets, this one pulls straight down. It doesn't flare out and fight you, adding virtual width. This one pulls straight down. So it's a very comfortable watch to wear on a smaller wrist. Now you can see everything you expect in a Royal Oak or an offshore you get here. With the reintroduction of the bracelet rather than the more conventional offshore strap, it sort of reintegrates the look that Gerald Genta penned back in 1972. So this one is perhaps a little bit more true to its Royal Oak heritage, an offshore that at least pays a nod of deference to precedent. I'll also mention that when Emmanuel Guet turned the Royal Oak into the Royal Oak offshore, he was thinking in terms of straps, which means you wouldn't get the fine finish that you get on this bracelet, and the bracelet truly is hand finished. It takes between 10 and 12 hours to finish a Royal Oak or Royal Oak offshore bracelet. You can see the contrast between the satin, the polished bevel, the satin of the tops. The same thing is rendered on the case, the diminishing bevel on the lug hoods, the crown guard structure, the contrast between satin and polish on the bezel. All of this is handcrafted, and all of this takes time. Now you can see removable links here are fixed by screws. We have what I believe to be a later clasp, as the clasp integrates a spring-loaded ceramic pin snap. So at some point, this watch was sent in for service and treated to a brand new Audemars Piguet factory yellow gold clasp, which is a wonderful upgrade to receive. As you can see, this component, which is critical to the security of the watch on the wrist, has been completely retrofitted, and it is modern specification in outstanding condition. Turning over to the case itself, you can see that this is very much Royal Oak in origin, but particularly in the crown guard structure, it announces itself as an offshore. Now you can see that the bezel gasket is one of the most distinctive features of an offshore, especially when it's in a contrasting color to the case. Here in yellow gold, it contrasts nicely with the black of that bezel gasket, and whereas the bezel gasket was a hairline styling feature of the original Royal Oak, on the offshore it's pronounced. It's a physical part as well as an element of the style, making it look more industrial and machine-like. You could see the hexagonal bolts on the bezel itself, a rounded off octagon inspired by a vintage diving helmet. That's the origin of that octagonal bezel. You can also see that the nitrile crown shoulder is also a hexagon. The dial is the Petite Tapisserie. In the early days, the Royal Oak offshore used the Petite rather than the Grand or the Mega, and this means that these early offshore dials are actually cut on a pantograph, whereas the later Mega Tapisserie is stamped. So this is a higher grade and traditional fabrication compared to later offshores. You can also see that it is the traditional and beautiful navy blue. The features on the dial are yellow gold, and if you're wondering, yes, this is a tritium dial, hands and indices, an original AP factory tritium dial from the era before Luminova. You also have the triple calendar with the radial date and then the day and the month in apertures, making this a nicely balanced dial that you can read at a glance with a practical complication. The case back You can see this was number 126 of this particular reference, and late D series, so mid-1990s before the turnover to the E's in the late 90s. And inside is, well, a JLC 889 and then a triple calendar module. Audemars Piguet calls this the caliber 2127 with a 2827 module. The movement features automatic winding, bidirectional, 28,800 vibration per hour beat rate, hacking or stop seconds, a 38-hour power reserve, adjustment exquisitely in 6 positions, not the chronometer or high horology standard of 5, but 6, and a 22-karat mass on the rotor rather than the more common 21 and 18-karat masses seen elsewhere. It also features water resistance down to 100 meters thanks to the screw-down crown. This is a versatile timepiece, a rarely seen offshore, and a wonderful way to wear an offshore on a smaller wrist comfortably, even underneath a cuff. An outstanding and rarely seen reference, it is even less common in yellow gold. Reach out to Tim Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.